MyOpenMath has a number of built-in macros or shortcuts that we can use to help evaluate mathematical expressions when we're building questions. Once we're already inside the question editor, we can learn more about this by clicking on the macro library help link. This will open up a list of all of the libraries that are included in MyOpenMath. The first several that we'll see start with the name core. Those are preloaded into the system, meaning we don't have to do anything special to access these, they're just built in. A lot of these deal with generating random values, creating strings and arrays that we've already talked about. But we want to spend some time talking about some of the core math macros. And then in the next video, we'll talk about how we would load in another library and access some of those additional commands. To start off with the core math macros, we can see that we have all of our trig functions and inverse trig functions that we can call on by inputting a value into those functions. There's an absolute value function, so we would use the command abs, and then in a set of parentheses, either the number or the variable we want to take the absolute value of. The square root command would work similarly. The root command would have two different values, each in its own set of parentheses, where n is the value we want to take n is the root we want to take, and t is the value that we want to take the square root of. So we would plug in 3 and 8 if we wanted to take the third root of 8. Similarly, we can find the greatest common denominator, or least common multiple of a list of values. We can generate the sign of a value in a couple of different ways. Using the command sign, so the full word sign, and then putting our value, our variable or our value in a set of parentheses, returns either 1 if we have a non-negative number, or -1 if we have a negative number. The command sgn gets a little bit more specific, and one of its outputs is a 0 if we have a value of 0, and then we get only +1 for strictly positive and -1 for strictly -1 numbers. For strictly negative numbers. If we put an exclamation mark after a number, that works as the factorial, so we can generate variables using any of these basic math macros. Additional things to keep in mind is that when we're working in the common control, if we were to set a variable a equal to e, that would be treated as the mathematical constant e. Not to be too confusing though, we can also define a variable e, which will not be treated as that mathematical constant, but instead whatever random value we generate. So whether we have that $sign in front or not dictates whether the system sees e as a constant or as a variable we're creating. Similarly, we can also call in the variable pi. So if we wanted to take pi times our variable a, which in this case is e, or times our variable e, which in this case is a random integer between -5 and 5, we can call on that by not putting any $sign in front of that, just the letters pi. Another tool that we can use is the percent symbol, which will calculate the modulus of two integers. So if we created two random variables, a and b, let's get rid of what we already have here so we're not duplicating variables, and generated two non-zero different random integers between -5 and 5, and we put a (2) since we're creating more than one random variable. We could include a statement like where a modulus b is not equal to 0. That means the modulus of those two integers would not be 0, so the remainder of the division of those two values would not come out to be 0. There would be some remainder, and this can be helpful specifically for things like creating a fraction. That we don't want to reduce to a whole number. So since we have that statement in there that we don't want the remainder of that division step to be 0, we know that these numbers won't completely reduce with each other. And every time we generate these values, we will end up with a fraction and not a whole number. But for other purposes too, we might want to be able to call on the modulus of two numbers. We can also calculate logs and natural logs. For natural logs, we would use the command ln and then input our variable. Or we could use the command log if we want the log base 10 of a value. Oh, and I'm probably taking the logs of some negative numbers, so let's change that randomization so that this is, say, 2 to 50. And what we're doing is finding the natural log of A and the log base 10 of B in this case. MyOpenMath will give you a number of decimal places when we calculate decimal answers like that. We can also look at rounding our values. So if we wanted to, say, round each of these results to, let's say, we'll round the natural log of A to 2 decimal places. We can do that by typing round, and then in a set of parentheses, that value that we want to round, and then comma, however many decimal places we want. So similarly, if we wanted to round the log base 10 of B, we could round that even to, say, 0 decimal places to round that to the nearest whole number. Related to the round command, we also have a floor and a ceiling command. So to force a value to either round up or down to the nearest integer. And then the last command that we'll take a look at here that can be useful for lists, data sets, is finding either the minimum or maximum of a list or an array. So let's create a new variable. And we'll put in the command min, min, and then we'll put in a list of values. In this case, we have we've got a few values that we've created. So we'll just type in that we want to find the minimum of all of these values, these variables that we've already created above. And I need to actually put that output in our question text so we can see that output. And we find that the minimum of all those values that we've created so far is 2. Similarly, we change min to max to get the maximum value. Alternatively, we could first start off by creating an array of, say, 15 random integers between -10 and 10. And then we could create a new variable which is either the max or min of that array that we just created. So multiple ways to use those min and max commands, as well as those other commands that we've introduced so far.